Folks, welcome back to Flat Irons Tuning. We're here today because we need to talk about the limited four-wheel drive rally car that Travis Pastrana has run in the 2025 ARA Rally Championship. It's come up in a couple of the podcasts lately. I think that maybe there's just not as much understood, or I think it's a really significant car for a couple of reasons, and I think there's just not as much maybe being talked about or said about this car, and so I wanted to basically do a feature on this because we've just seen this latest episode of Launch Control that Subaru has put out, which, now that it's the end of the 2025 season, ironically, they're going back and they're showing the beginning of the 2025 season, but in part what they're showing is a lot of behind the scenes of how they built Pastrana's limited four-wheel drive car. So what I want to talk about is, how is it as good as it is? How did Vermont Sports Car build it? Why is it significant? And what does this mean for the future of rally? Because I think this is actually a really big deal, and it's going to have a big impact on the future of rally because of the results that we're seeing with this limited four-wheel drive car. Now, why is it significant? Well, simply put, it's because this is a Subaru rally car. Now, as you're watching this, you might think, well, I've seen Brendan Semenuk win the ARA championship at driving a Subaru for the last handful of years. What's different? Well, it's because that's not a Subaru. That is a Vermont Sports Car spaceship. There's almost nothing in common between the open class rally cars that Vermont Sports Car builds and an actual Subaru. It doesn't have a Subaru engine, doesn't have a Subaru drivetrain. It's basically a tube chassis car. It's a completely different suspension. There's nothing, almost nothing Subaru in it. It really is a Vermont Sports Car spaceship. It's not a Subaru rally car. But that is not the case for a limited four-wheel drive car. Stay with me here. Let's talk about rule set real quick. All right. I'll put a link to the ARA rules and you can check this out. But basically, a lot of things have to be basically stock to be a limited four-wheel drive car. As an example, like the cylinder heads, they have to be OEM. The turbocharger has to be an OEM turbo or an accepted OEM alternative turbo. Very limited there. They're limited on boost pressure. They have to run 34 or 36 millimeter restrictor. There's a couple different options to be in the limited four-wheel drive class. The subframes, you're allowed to change one suspension connecting point, but that's it. Everything else has to be OEM. These shock towers, you can move the shock towers up 3.5 inches, but in the axis of travel only. OEM tower walls must remain. Front and rear subframes have to be OEM. You can only strengthen them. You can't modify them. The dampeners must use OEM or raised mounting locations, and front and rear hubs have to be OEM. Control arms have to be OEM, maintain OEM dimensions and geometry. I can't add track width. There's just so many details in the limited four-wheel drive class that make it so that you have to use factory components or factory geometry. So with that, and factory engine, this is what is so significant with this limited four-wheel drive car build, because it is fast. He's had a lot of success with it. As proof of that, let's look at a couple race results and compare. Like there's 3 races where we can compare Travis's time with Semenuk. The first is where the car debuted, which was the Olympus Rally this year. I'll put it up on the screen, but basically in that race, Travis didn't finish. I think he was 4th in class. He was 17.5 minutes behind Semenuk. But again, teething problems. This was their first outing with the car. Then they went to Oregon Trail. In Oregon Trail, Travis was only about just under 5 minutes behind Semenuk. And then in the Ojibwe Forest Rally, Travis was about 8 minutes behind Semenuk, but definitely fast and definitely towards the top of the field for those last 2 events. If we look at, there's 2 other rallies that I think are worth looking at, which is Rally Colorado and LSPR, Lake Superior Performance Rally. Both of those events Travis ran, Semenuk was not there, but we can compare Travis now to the other cars in the limited four-wheel drive class in other classes. So at Rally Colorado, Travis finished 2nd. He was the first limited four-wheel drive car. He finished just ahead of the Despains, which were in N8 four-wheel drive. They were driving 2.5 RS, and he was about 5 seconds faster overall. The next limited four-wheel drive car was Robert Shabed, sorry if I got that wrong, in a 2002 WRX, and that was about 17 seconds faster, or 17 seconds behind Pastrana. So a really good showing for him there in that car. And then at LSPR, Travis won that rally overall. He beat 2 RC2 cars, which are, those are, this is a Hyundai i20 and a Ford Fiesta Rally 2. Those are some rally, some serious rally platforms that he was faster than. He won overall by about 2.5, 3 seconds. The next limited four-wheel drive car was an 11 STI that he was about 10 seconds faster than, and then there's a regional limited four-wheel drive that he was about 8 seconds faster than. There was a 2002 WRX. So he's doing well. He's beating some of these older chassis, and he's beating Rally 2 cars. It just goes to show that this platform is fast. So now the question is, how did Vermont Sports Car do it? How are they doing it, especially with them having to keep this car as close to stock as they do? That's the big X factor. Suspension has been the biggest challenge basically since the GD chassis ended 2007 with the McPherson front and rear suspension. Starting with the GR all the way through the VA chassis, they have multi-link rear suspension, and it's been very travel limited, and so that's been a big challenge to get it so that the suspension can soak up the bumps and stuff like it needs to do with the rally car. The engine is the really interesting thing too here, because it does have to be very close to stock. It has to use a stock turbo, but obviously there's some serious power potential for this FE24 engine with the restrictor on it. I think that's been a big advantage as well. We don't have a lot of information there, but the key piece of this information, I think, is this launch control video where they're showing some of the build details, and it's a very curated video, and we just kind of see some swipes, and I'll put them up on the screen as we go through them. But it does show some of the secret sauce, I think, of what Vermont Sports Car is doing to get the suspension to work, which is really cool to get this insight. And again, like the little changes that they're making, it shows, I think, some of the potential there with this chassis. So basically what we're seeing is that they're using basically a very close to stock engine. They're using a 34mm restrictor, and well, let's see. Let's talk about suspension first. The rear suspension is where all the special sauce is. As you see, what we can glean from their video. So they're remaking all of the factory linkages, but what has been explained to me is that they're all the same length and have the same mounting points. They're just more robust. Some of them don't have the curves that the factory ones do, but the point-to-point is the same. The change is the upper control arm. So we ran into this, or we figured this out when we were playing around with our VB and raising it up an inch. That upper control arm with the ball joint, that's where we had to modify that and push the ball joint out a little bit, and that's where we gained a lot of travel. That is what they have modified, or one of the key things that they have modified on this limited four-wheel drive car. What they have done, what it appears, is that they have taken a factory ball joint and converted it to a Heim joint. And if you look, it's very close, and I will try and get as good a picture of this as I possibly can. They've made a bracket that bolts into the factory knuckle, because again, this is a limited car that has to be a factory part, then goes up to accept that Heim joint. I think it's basically pivoting at a higher point, maybe. It looks like it's a little bit higher, but it's hard to know for absolute certain. But because it's a Heim joint, it is actually able to fully articulate and fully move, whereas a ball joint is going to be limited because the ball can hit some limitations. So I think that is part of it. And really interestingly, you can actually see in the rear subframe where they put a notch into the rear, not the rear subframe, the rear of the chassis, to accommodate this new upper control arm that they've made, because it looks like it's a straight point-to-point arm. The factory ones have kind of a dip to go underneath the chassis, and so theirs is a straight point-to-point connection, and then they've got the notch so that it doesn't hit the chassis. Pretty standard. I think they're using Riger suspension, but definitely beefy. And you can see there's another clip where it's very clear that they are raising those rear strut tops probably a good, I would say, at least 2 inches. Maybe they're going the full 3.5 inches that's allowed in the rules to try and make it a longer strut and give you some more travel there. But that's where they're getting. That's what they're doing to the rear suspension to get it to work. And then for the engine, we saw a couple quick images of the engine. We know that it's largely close to stock because it has to be. They switched to a hydraulic steering rack, which I guess is not terribly surprising because they're used to whatever hydraulic rack they're using on the other cars. But they converted to that, not exactly sure how they're driving it. And then there's a big oil cooler on the top of the engine, which is not surprising for this direct injected engine, but so you can see that on top. We don't ever see the turbo or the intercooler or the intercooler piping, really. So, I mean, I think it's a front mount. Well, it's obviously a front mount because there's no room for it on top of the engine. But I'm curious what all that looks like. But it's just a front mounted intercooler. I don't think we can get too exotic with it. So that's basically where all the performance is coming from. They're using an STI 6-speed with an X-Shift Sequential in it. So I mean, that's certainly helpful for the drivetrain. But I mean, that's kind of it. So it's kind of the older known quantity of sequential, the differentials, the STI drivetrain, this FA24 engine, which is again very close to stock because it has to be because of the rules, and then this modified, built, lightly modified suspension, but that does seem to be really working really well. What Vermont Sports Car says in this video that their plans are for this is they want to basically offer this kit up for the limited four-wheel drive in 3 different options. One is basically just a plan, so as a guide. Who knows what that's going to cost. Second is a parts package. Like, hey, if you have a shell and you want to build exactly what we have, you can buy the whole kit and caboodle, which, I mean, that's kind of a cool thing to offer up. A DIY rally car build, for instance. And then option 3 is a turnkey, ready-to-go rally car. Price is not announced. The guess is probably somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000 for this thing, which is going to be a hefty price tag, but I mean, there's a lot of work and R&D that went into it. It's interesting, and again, like seeing what they're making, like none of this stuff is crazy. If you did not want to go to this full crazy extent of like completely stripping down the chassis, making some modifications, going to all of this extent of like doing this crazy level of build, like Pastrana's car, if you just have a 22 WRX that you want to turn into a rally car, you can put a cage into it. That's a known quantity. You can put in an STI 6-speed. That's a known quantity. You can put the X-Shift Sequential or any other sequential, like a Modena sequential into it. Known quantity again. The suspension to get it to work, I mean, that is becoming more of a known quantity because we're seeing what they're doing. We've kind of figured out what we've done with the Cusco bits. Like, I think there's a lot of known quantities here where this VB is going to come together and be a pretty, formidable rally car. And that's exciting because it's so close to stock. We're seeing the development, and we're getting these pieces of the puzzle that Vermont Sports Car is using to make this VB chassis as capable off-road as it is. And I mean, I think there's a huge value to that. The question is, well, it's not a question. I'm going to say that what this means is that the VB chassis, this is kind of the future of Subaru Rally. And I say that just because GCs, the newest GC 2001, we're almost 25 years old for that car, or for that chassis. The GD WRX 2007 was the last year, so we're approaching 19 years and older for any of these GD chassis cars. So in the end, why I wanted to make this video is because I think it really is significant that Vermont Sports Car, because Travis Pastrana like twisted their arm to do it, but regardless, they decided to build this limited four-wheel drive car this is a Subaru Rally car. This is like fully based on a car that you would drive off the showroom floor, tweak a little bit here for safety, a little bit here for drivetrain, a little bit here for suspension, a little bit here to fit in the rule set, and then just go out there and run. That's, to a certain extent, especially when it comes to rally, that's what makes a Subaru, that it's really close to a production car. And this is really, really close to a production car. And we're seeing with what Travis is doing with the car, how fast it can be, how it is in his hands, granted, faster than a lot of other older cars, these older chassis, the GDs, the GCs. And to me, that's what tells me, like, I think there's something with the suspension, there's something with the engine. There's a lot of these little pieces to the puzzle of this updated 20-year newer chassis that makes it just that little bit better. And it's exciting to see what it is. It's exciting what we're able to see with Vermont Sports Car's video, or with Subaru's launch control video, I should say, what some of these changes were to get this level of performance out of this chassis. It shows what the VB WRX is capable of, especially driving off-road. We got a glimpse at that, with our lifted VB because of just how good it seems to work off-road. And this tells us we were 100% on the right track with a lot of that stuff. And it just shows the capability of that car. And I think that this is what makes the VB the future. I think it's going to be the future of rally here for Subaru, because if it's that much better in these little places, little ways, I hope that with another launch controller, another Vermont Sports Car video, they maybe dive into more detail about why they did the changes, or why they made the changes that they did with the rear suspension, and what they did to the engine a little bit more. Those sorts of things. I mean, when you know what you're trying to accomplish, or what you need to accomplish to get the car to be competitive, well, you know what you're doing. You know what needs attention, and that is going to help. And then this is going to help realize this goal of getting a bunch of limited four-wheel drive cars that are similarly capable, so Travis and everybody else can kind of dice it out with these limited four-wheel drive cars. And I think it's really cool that in some of these events, especially at LSPR, that Travis was able to beat some of these RC2 cars. It shows how capable that chassis can be. And so if nothing else, the other point here is just it shows the value, or maybe the rally heritage that is baked into the VB WRX that is not readily apparent, but it's there, and now this is kind of starting to bring that to the surface. If you're out there and you want to build one of these, or well, if you want to build a rally car in general, and you want to build a rally Subaru, does this mean that the VB is the chassis of choice? Especially as you start to get a little bit older, a little bit more affordable. I mean, maybe it's worth going into this newer chassis to have some of these little baked-in advantages that are going to be hard to duplicate with, say, an older EJ Series engine. Or Matt, if you're crazy enough to try and put an FA24 into a GD chassis, that could also be interesting too. So yeah, that's all I had for this video. Hopefully you find it interesting. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks for your support as always. And until next time, stay tuned with Flatiron's Tuning.